Heal, Flame here, and welcome to the final FlameHisWorld video of 2024. As per the norm on this channel, at the end of the year I like to do a bit of a retrospective on the year as a whole, the kind of content that I've put out on both this channel and the HellfireComms channel, and just generally go over how I feel about it, how I feel it's gone and all that good stuff. So FlameHisWorld has been a bit of an eclectic grab bag of different kinds of videos this year. At the start of the year I started a new side series on the channel called A Look At, which is basically a quick look format series where I play through a sample of whatever game I happen to be covering and give my impressions of it. It's not necessarily blind impressions, but it's kind of that idea of just a way to cover games that wouldn't necessarily lend themselves to full LPs, or games that for one reason or another I don't feel like doing a full LP of, but I still want to show off in some capacity. The first one of those was my Halo Combat Evolved anniversary video, which, if I'm being completely honest, this is something that I've had just sitting on my hard drive since, I want to say, 2020. It was originally going to be a full playthrough, but for one reason or another I just lost interest in it at the time. It kind of fell into the mix between all the other things I was working on at the time, and I never got around to finishing it. But I also quite liked how that first hour or so showed off what Halo is about, so I decided that this year, as I was starting this new series, I might as well repurpose what I had, and I feel like it did a decent enough job for that. The second one that I put up was my Persona 3 Reload video, which it was sort of a blind video in the sense that it was the first time I was playing that particular version of the game, but I knew what to expect with Persona 3 going in, since I've played Persona 3 Portable before and beat that. I quite liked what I saw, although I think what hurt my impressions during that first video, during the first 2 hours that I covered in that video, is that it's very tutorial heavy. And I feel like the fact that I was getting irate about being stopped every couple of minutes for a tutorial as soon as I got into Tartarus came through. But I will say I ended up really liking the game as a whole, and even though I had just played through Persona 3 Portable the year beforehand, I ended up playing through the entirety of 3 Reload and the Episode Aegis DLC on FC playthroughs this year. So that's kind of how much of a good impression that remake left on me. I don't know if the first 2 hours were necessarily the best portion, but I feel like the video was pretty good on the whole, so I'm kind of happy about that. I wish I'd had the opportunity to make more videos of this format this year, but at the very least the foundation is there now, so going into next year and going forward, I imagine there will be more videos like it. The next one on my list is pretty quick, that being the Sonic X Shadow Generations trailer reaction. Now, I will say, I can't see myself ever making reaction videos a prominent part of my output, because in general, I know I'm not the most charismatic person. I know that I'm not quite as excitable as some of the other people out there who do reaction videos, and so it's not really to my strength. But when I first heard that there was going to be a Sonic Generations re-release and it was going to focus on Shadow, I kind of knew that it was going to be something I'd be interested in, so I just put that video together on a whim. Like I say, not going to be a regular part of my output, but for someone who doesn't do reaction videos that often, I'm kind of okay with how it came out, and I did spend quite a bit of time after the fact just analysing what I'd seen. So it's more of a trailer reaction and analysis than pure reaction, so I think that was okay for what it was. The full Let's Play I put out this year was a live Let's Play of Sonic Lost World for the 3DS. Now this one, I recorded the LP shortly after doing a practice run beforehand, so it wasn't blind. I wouldn't have been completely blind anyway, because I played the first part of the game back in 2013 when it came out. But for a live run of a game that is kind of on the difficult side in some of the later levels, I feel like I did an okay job. I'm pretty happy with how the playthrough came out on the whole, really. and most of that was a pretty smooth recording process. The Frozen Factory level being the exception to that, because God, that level is an absolute... it's a shit show. But on the whole, I think what surprised me over the course of both my practice run for the LP and the LP itself is that I ended up appreciating the game much more than I ever did. Like, I never got around to finishing it back in the day when it first came out because I just really didn't like it, but playing through it again, I came to appreciate some of the more interesting level design ideas and some of the concepts that they brought in, to the point where, even though if you're comparing it directly to the HD game, the HD game is more polished than the whole. The 3DS one, I would say, is the more interesting of the two versions, so I'm glad that I did the LP, if only just to get that little bit more appreciation for it. Next up on my list was a full album that I put out on April Fool's, made using Suno AI. Now, this was a project I was sort of just dicking around with, really. This wasn't originally going to be anything, it's just when I discovered Suno AI as a tool, and this was back in, I want to say either December or January, like very early on in the software's development, it was quite primitive. So I just sat down and started putting together these shitpost songs. Like, there's a song about bleeding Sonic Shoe. That's how seriously I was taking it. But yeah, that was using, I think, either V2 or early V3 model on Suno, and it was kind of archaic at that point. Like, I would try and generate something, and then I'd generate like a follow-on part for it and try and stitch them together, and sometimes it wouldn't come out that well, sometimes it would. Sometimes it was a bit disjointed as well, but some of them songs are really catchy, so I'm okay with that. Like, it was kind of a ball ache to get it to do exactly what you wanted back then, but nowadays the software has improved immensely. Like, V4 of Suno is just really fun to play with, and it's got to a point now where I have a little playlist of songs that just ones I've personally generated for my own enjoyment, and I just put them on and listen to them now. The software is really impressive. The album that I put out back on April Fool's, like I say, it was a shitpost album, but it introduced me to something that I would now say is kind of a hobby of mine, just playing around with AI tools. So yeah, for what was a throwaway April Fool's trick, like, yeah, I'm happy with it. The final project that I put up on FlameHisWorld was my DLC coverage of Slipstream, which is a game that I previously covered the main game of several years ago. This video showed off both the Blue Hour and Supernova Cups, which were individual releases. I'd kind of put off covering the Blue Hour stuff, and by the time I got around to it, or at least I was thinking, like, I'll do this soon, the developer Ansdor had just announced the Supernova DLC, so I ended up just combining them into one video, and I love that game. It was fun going back to that game, it was fun covering it again, so I realised that it probably isn't to everyone's taste coverage of that kind of game, because it's a racing game, and the commentary tends to go it tends to go walkies. The commentary tends to go walkies with racing games. But, you know, it's a fun game, and I'm glad to have gave it even more coverage. Next up is the HellfireComms side of things. So first up is Super Mario 64. This is a run that I'd wanted to do for a little while now. The main reason for that is that a few years ago I tried doing a stream playthrough of that during one of our charity marathons, and it just didn't go that well. Like, I wasn't feeling that great, it was quite late at night and I was tired and I was getting grouchy, and I ended up not finishing it because, well, I was just playing terribly. And Super Mario 64 is iconic for a reason, it's a very charming game, and I think it deserved a much better showing than that. So for the proper HFC playthrough, I went out of my way to get a full 120 star run down, and it was just a really fun time talking about Mario. It's just it's such an endearing game. It was just a really good time. Up next was the Sonic 3D Flicky's Island, or Sonic 3D Blast, because I was playing the US version. and we covered the Saturn version. This is a game that for the longest time I did not like at all. Going through it again for the playthrough, it's still not an amazing game, but it at least inspired enough that there was stuff for us to talk about. There was another playthrough that I did with Tom and Rich. They all were this year. All 4 of them were that lineup. And I think we had some pretty interesting conversations about it. Tom likes the game much more than I do, but I still can appreciate where people are coming from when they say they like the game. So that playthrough was a pretty good time. After that was the Sonic the Hedgehog Pocket Adventure playthrough, one of the more obscure picks from the franchise. Again, that was another one that I pre-recorded the footage for. I don't really have much to say about the playthrough, other than that I think my gameplay was pretty decent, and I think that the commentary was pretty decent. I feel like it's pretty much, if you have watched our Sonic LPs before, especially like our 2D Sonic LPs, it wasn't really anything to write home about, but it was also... It's Sonic. I like hanging out with Tom and Rich and shooting the shit about Sonic, and it was more of that. So it's another one for the collection. I'm quite happy with it. And the last one that we did this year, again with the same lineup, was our Shadow Generations playthrough, which Tom was playing live for that one with Rich and I in the call. And that was a really good time. It actually... Energy-wise, it reminds me of the Sonic Forces playthrough we did back in 2017. Even though this game is a much better game than that, it kind of has that new Sonic game vibe. We were all excited about it, all played it recently at the time of recording, and yeah, it was a really good time. I feel like maybe I was fanboying over Shadow quite a lot, and that was probably a big part of it, but Shadow Generations, I recommend the LP and I recommend playing the game. It was a great time. So yeah, overall, on the whole, I feel like I'm kind of split on how I feel about it, because I've been very positive about all the projects that I've mentioned here, and I pretty much like them all. The problem is that there really hasn't been that much, and that's been because for me, on a personal level, this year has been absolutely exhausting mentally. And I don't mean to kind of make this a vent or like using people as therapy sort of thing, but I do feel like I should add a bit of context as to why I've been so distant this year. And it's mainly been a death by 1,000 cuts kind of situation. It's very much felt like there's been one thing after another that's caused me to either be in a bad mood or be more busy than I'd like to be, or be sick, or just something that meant I couldn't put my all into what I want to be doing. And after a while that wears you down. Very early on in the year, I had a period of time where my electricity in the house was constantly cutting out, and I was reliant on a generator outside which kept breaking down. And it's very hard to commit to recording stuff when you've constantly got at the back of your mind that I might lose my power and lose all this. That went on for a couple of weeks, and as I was getting back into the swing of things after that, I came down with a really, really bad flu that lasted for like a month. That was absolutely bloody miserable. And then again, once I was getting better from that, then I started having tech issues with my PC at the time. Like, one of the hard drives just started slowing down to a crawl. Like, there was clearly something wrong with it. But because of the age of the PC, I thought that was time to bite the bullet and get a new PC. Which I did, like, rather than just trying to dick around replacing stuff. It's like the PC was already quite old at that point, so I then got a new PC, had to deal with the teething issues that come with a new setup, and so I was kind of playing catch up for a while. And then, again, as I get back into the swing of things, I get sick again. I get a really sore throat that lasts another few weeks, and it constantly felt like I was playing catch up, which... Again, that goes back to the whole death by 1,000 cuts thing. It's like there's no one thing that has happened this year that has been overly traumatic or upsetting that I can't handle. I can deal with tech issues. I can deal with sickness. There's nothing new there. But when it's so many things in quick succession, you kind of mentally check out. And I feel like that's what happened. It kind of brought back a lot of other lingering problems that I've had that I kind of did reach rock bottom, to the point where I have recently got back in touch with my old therapist, and we've had one session. I'm making it a regular thing next year, because I'm the kind of person who, for the most part, I will live with a problem rather than trying to fix it. But after a chain of small problems built up until I just had no drive left, I kind of realised that, okay, I actually need to do something about this. So I'm going to actually be an adult for once. I'm going to actually try and get my own life in order, which I probably should have done a decade ago, but you know how I am. I didn't want to make like some miserable, depressing update video about it back at the time, because I don't like it when people sulk online. I don't like it when people throw pity parties and that. But now I've kind of got my thoughts in order and I have a plan on how to address it. I feel like now's a good time to just say that this is where I'm at, this is what's happening. This is a much more personal thing because it's kind of brought back some old lingering stresses that I've been suppressing for a while, but so I can't really say how this will affect content going forward, but just know that I've got it under control now. I can't promise that FlameHisWorld will ever have regular uploads because it is strictly a hobby channel, whereas my FC playthroughs channel is my work channel that I make a living from. So I obviously have to prioritise my job over my hobby. That's just life, really. But I'm trying to get my head in better order, and hopefully that will have a positive knock-on effect to my content. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at the end of 2024. I hope that this year has been treating you guys well, and I hope that 2025 will treat you all even better. I'm going to do my best, and I hope for the best for everyone else as well. So from me, the Flameclaw, I want to wish you a very happy new year. I'll see you in 2025. Bye bye for now.